If you ain't sure what's wrong with your patient, it generally takes care of it. Hey, you in there, open up.
Please, madam.
You ought to wash this window.
Irene Ryan made $500,000 a year playing Granny Clampett. She could have bought mansions. Instead, she died in a tiny house at 107 Espartaway. After her death, no one touched it. But when explorers finally broke in, they found something nobody expected. Inside were props from the show and a letter that changed everything. The woman who made millions lived like she had nothing. And the reason why will break your heart. Irene Ryan was born on October 17, 1902, in El Paso, Texas. Her family had almost nothing. Her father, James Merritt Noble, was a low-ranking Army sergeant from North Carolina. Her mother, Catherine McSherry, had come all the way from Ireland, hoping for a better life. But life in El Paso was tough. They lived in tight spaces and often depended on others just to eat. El Paso was full of immigrants and shaped by the Mexican Revolution. But for Irene's family, it meant surviving from one day to the next. That early struggle became part of her. It shaped her grit, her humor, and her drive to rise above it all. At home, things were even stranger. Irene had a sister, Anna, who was born in 1885. That made her 17 years older than Irene. By the time Irene could talk, Anna was already out living her own life. So Irene grew up more like an only child, surrounded by adults and serious talk. She learned to keep herself entertained. She became independent fast. That childhood gave her a sharp mind and a strong sense of herself, skills that later helped her survive in show business. Her first real taste of applause came when she was just 11 years old. In 1913, she sang Pretty Baby at an amateur contest in San Francisco's Valencia Theater. She won the top prize, $3. That would be nearly $98 today. For Irene, it felt like winning a treasure. The crowd's cheers lit a fire in her. She didn't just enjoy it, she needed it. That $3 moment showed her that performing could lead her out of poverty. It was the start of everything. At age 14, Irene pulled a bold move. She wanted to join a stock theater company in California, but the rules said no one under 16 could work. So, she lied. She told them she was old enough and they believed her. That one lie changed her life. It got her on stage. And once she was there, she proved she belonged. She didn't just get by, she stood out. She earned her spot with raw talent and stubborn persistence. It was risky, but it worked. That chance gave her a taste of what a life in theater could be. 2 years later, she made another big choice. She dropped out of high school at 16. Most girls her age were still in class, but Irene was chasing a dream. She joined traveling theater companies and performed almost every night. For 4 years, she lived the hard life of the stage. She learned how to hold an audience's attention. She worked on her timing, her voice, her presence. By the time she hit 20, she wasn't just another actress. She was a pro. That same year in 1922, something else happened that would change everything. She met Tim Ryan. He was also in vaudeville, and they clicked instantly. A few months later, they were married. More than just husband and wife, they became a team. They called themselves Tim and Irene, and their act took off. Vaudeville was the heartbeat of American comedy back then. And together, they made people laugh in theaters all over the country. Their timing, their chemistry, their style, it all worked. They weren't just good, they were great. What made them famous was a routine called Dumb Dora. Irene played a clueless, silly wife, and Tim played the annoyed husband. The crowd loved it. Tim's signature line, "Will you stop?" became so popular, they used it as the title of one of their films in 1937. People thought Irene really was that ditzy. But that just proved how skilled she was. Her performance wasn't an accident. It was craft. Together, they took that act from the stage to radio and then to film. During the Great Depression, people needed laughs, and the Ryans delivered. From 1935 to 1937, they filmed 11 comedy shorts with educational pictures. That pace, 11 films in 2 years, was exhausting, but they handled it. Their most well-known shorts included Family Troubles, Hamlet and Eggs, and Will You Stop? These films played in theaters across the country, giving them a nationwide audience. In 1936, they were even picked to replace Jack Benny on NBC's The Jell-O Summer Show, a major honor at the time. They were everywhere. People couldn't get enough of them. But while things looked perfect from the outside, behind the scenes, it was different. Their marriage had problems. Friends said they argued constantly. Being on the road under pressure and always working side by side started to wear them down. They were professionals, though, so they kept smiling in public. They kept the act going, but the tension kept building, and eventually it became too much. In 1942, after 20 years of marriage, they divorced. It shocked their fans and the industry. They had been one of the most beloved comedy duos in the business. But now they were splitting up. There was no public scandal, no dramatic headlines. Still, the news hit hard. Irene kept the name Ryan even after the divorce. It wasn't just a name anymore. It was her identity. She chose never to remarry. When asked about it later, she said, "The stage is my partner and the audience is my family." That quote said everything. She wasn't interested in love stories. She had one love, performing. Even after the divorce, Irene and Tim sometimes worked together. It was rare, but it showed they still had mutual respect. For Irene, the split was more than the end of a relationship. It was the start of her solo rise. Vaudeville was dying, but television was just beginning, and Irene Ryan was far from finished. In the summer of 1936, Irene Ryan and her husband Tim were given a shot most vaudeville acts could only dream about. They were asked to fill in for Jack Benny on NBC's Red Network. This wasn't just a summer gig. It was a test. Jack Benny was already a giant in radio and his fans expected brilliance. The Ryans brought their famous Dumb Dora routines to the airwaves. Irene played the scatterbrained wife. Tim was the straight man. Their chemistry worked. It worked so well that people still talk about those broadcasts from September 20th and 27th, captured forever on old lacquer discs. That summer, the Ryans crossed a line out of the fading world of vaudeville and into the national spotlight of radio. Their names were now known across America, but the road ahead was not smooth. In 1942, Irene and Tim divorced. Most comedy teams would fall apart after that. She didn't. She reinvented herself. And by 1948, she had joined forces with one of the biggest entertainers in the world, Bob Hope. For 2 years, she toured with him and appeared on his radio shows. She wasn't just good, she was so funny that Hope himself started calling her the gal who makes Bob Hope laugh. That wasn't a compliment, it was a crown. Few people could crack up Bob Hope on stage or off. But Irene did it over and over. It made her stand out. And in a world of fast-talking, male-dominated comedy, she carved out her place by sheer talent. But it wasn't just studio work. When World War II broke out, she didn't stay safe in California. She followed Bob Hope to the front lines. In 1944 alone, their USO group flew over 30,000 miles and gave more than 150 shows across Europe and the South Pacific. The flights were dangerous. The airfields were primitive. Sometimes they performed just miles away from enemy lines. But Irene showed up every time, telling jokes to soldiers who hadn't smiled in weeks. She visited hospitals, too, lifting spirits wherever she went. These were not scripted moments. These were raw, real, and often terrifying. And she never backed down. Her service didn't stop when the war ended. In 1948 and 1949, she joined Hope again, this time for the Berlin airlift. It was the first big fight of the Cold War. West Berlin was blockaded by the Soviets and American planes were flying in supplies day and night. Over 275,000 flights covered more than 92 million miles, delivering 2.3 million tons of aid. It was tense, it was dangerous, and it claimed 81 lives. Right in the middle of that, Irene Ryan was there performing for exhausted flight crews, ground staff, and medics. She wasn't looking for medals. She just wanted to keep them going. Long before all of this, Irene and Tim had already made their mark with a radio show of their own. Tim and Irene aired in the 1930s and turned them into household names. Their act was sharp. Irene played the dim but clever wife. Tim was the straight man, constantly losing his patience. The show was a hit and their catchphrases spread across the country. Even after their divorce, they kept working together. It was rare, but they made it work. Between 1935 and 1937, they also starred in 11 comedy shorts for educational pictures. These films, like Hamlet and Eggs and Will You Stop, weren't just quick laughs. They were polished, punchy, and full of the same chemistry that made them famous. In 1943, Irene took on a new kind of role. She played Edgar Kennedy's wife in 2 RKO comedy shorts. It was a familiar setup. Kennedy was always the hot-headed husband. The wife was always exasperated, but Irene brought something different. She wasn't shrill. She wasn't just background noise. She played the character with nerves and control, and it stood out. Other actresses had played Kennedy's wife before, but Ryan's version was memorable. This kind of role would later become her specialty: fussy, anxious women who were funny because they felt real. That same year, she showed even more range. She took a role in a country music film called Oh My Darling Clementine. It wasn't a big-budget feature, but it let Irene step outside comedy. She didn't play a joke. She played a real character in a story full of music, romance, and small-town charm. It was part of a wave of hillbilly musicals that gave wartime audiences a break from bad news. And it proved that Irene could do more than crack jokes. She could carry a scene even in a new genre. Still, comedy was her home turf. Between 1935 and 1937, she and Tim Ryan had cranked out 11 comedy shorts, an astonishing pace. The titles may sound silly, but the work wasn't. These films were crafted to highlight their timing and delivery, and they became so popular that Tim's line, "Will you stop?" caught on like wildfire. The fact that they kept working together even after splitting up spoke volumes about their professionalism. And for Irene, it was training. These were the roles that taught her how to land a joke, steal a scene, and survive in an industry that never made things easy for women. The late 1940s and early 1950s brought steady work, but not stardom. Hollywood kept casting her in the same types of roles: nurses, neighbors, chatty aunts. She appeared in films like Half Angel in 1951 and Rockabilly Baby in 1957. Always the sidekick, never the lead, but she kept showing up, always on time, always prepared. She landed a part on The Jack Carson Show in 1946 and made her first TV appearance on The Danny Thomas Show in 1955. Others gave up. Irene didn't. And yet, behind the scenes, there were chances that slipped away. She came close to bigger roles, but again and again, they went to someone else. Maybe it was politics. Maybe it was prejudice against vaudeville. Maybe it was just bad luck. Whatever the reason, those near misses haunted her. She said she was always scared of being fired, always waiting for the axe. But when the Beverly Hillbillies came along, she almost missed out again. The casting agent thought she was all wrong. Ryan had done vaudeville, radio, and comedy, but none of it screamed tough hillbilly matriarch. To him, she didn't look the part, didn't sound the part, and definitely didn't feel like Granny Clampett. But Ryan wasn't the type to back down. She'd spent years working for scraps in showbiz. She wasn't about to let one opinion end everything. She went around him. She picked up the phone and called Paul Henning himself. That call changed her life. She didn't beg, she challenged. "Do I have to go home and put on my gray wig and shawl to convince you?" That line caught Henning off guard. It wasn't just sass. It was confidence, precision, and total control. She knew who Granny was, and she made it clear that nobody else could bring her to life. Henning listened. He gave her a real audition. She showed up and didn't wait for questions. As soon as she walked into the room, she turned into Granny: voice, walk, eyes, anger, laughter. She threatened to take people to the woodshed if they didn't behave. The transformation was instant. Everyone in the room stopped breathing. She wasn't auditioning. She was the role. There was no debate. She had it. But even then, the production had concerns. Paul Henning was nervous about hiring someone her age. TV shoots were long and brutal. Scenes could run from 7 o'clock in the morning until 5 o'clock in the evening. Most actresses her age would have folded under that kind of pressure. Ryan didn't flinch. She told Henning flat out, "Cast someone younger and they'll burn out. Cast me and I'll work circles around them." She was right. She did. And it wasn't just words, she backed it up every single day. Here's what most people don't know: Ryan was only a few years older than Buddy Ebsen, who played Jed Clampett. On-screen, she was his mother-in-law. Off-screen, they were nearly the same age. It was pure acting and makeup magic. She wore heavy wigs, prosthetics, and frumpy dresses. But what really sold it was her body language. She moved like an old woman. She talked like one. She felt like one, and the audience believed it. Behind all the jokes and moonshine bottles, Irene Ryan was pulling off something incredible. Granny Clampett was a loud, stubborn firecracker of a character. But Ryan gave her layers. There was heart, rage, pride, tradition. She wasn't a joke. She was a force. And the world noticed. In 1963 and 1964, Ryan was nominated for back-to-back Emmys for Outstanding Lead Actress. She stood shoulder to shoulder with names like Mary Tyler Moore and Shirley Booth. She had earned it, and the money. It was massive. At the height of the show's success, Irene Ryan was pulling in $500,000 a year. That was in the 1960s. Back then, the average house cost less than $20,000. Most people made just over $6,000 a year. Ryan was making superstar money, and she didn't blow it. While other stars wasted fortunes on cars, parties, and bad investments, Ryan played it smart. She bought property. She bought stocks. She lived simply. No mansions, no wild nights, just her work, her friends, and her cats. After she died in 1973, her house was found mostly untouched, quiet, modest, and full of memories. No gold-plated bathroom, no private theater, just a woman's life frozen in time. And she didn't stop at saving, she gave back. With no children and no direct heirs, she left her $1 million estate, worth over $6 million today, to create the Irene Ryan Foundation, a scholarship for young theater students. She never had kids of her own, but she gave thousands of others a shot at the stage. Still, one part of her legacy often shocks fans. Off-screen, no one recognized her. Without the wig, the makeup, and the clothes, Irene Ryan looked nothing like Granny. She was younger, thinner, and elegant. People who worked with her on set sometimes did a double take. Strangers walked past her without a clue. She loved it. She enjoyed the freedom, the privacy, the ability to slip through crowds unnoticed. Her most famous gag on the show, the rheumatism medicine, wasn't just for laughs. That moonshine was a key part of her comedy. She used it as a cure-all, anesthesia, and even as a weapon. The show joked that it was so strong you couldn't uncork it near an open flame. She lugged it around, poured it into jars, and gave people a whiff that nearly knocked them out. The white lightning wasn't just funny, it was cultural, a nod to mountain medicine, to old traditions, to a forgotten way of life, and she carried it with pride. Even Granny's backstory was deeper than most people remember. She was a Confederate descendant. She loved Jefferson Davis. She hated Yankees and revenuers. She was dunked Baptist, not sprinkled. Her family had feuds. Her worldview came straight out of the 1800s. All of that gave writers fuel. They could explore the clash between old and new, between Beverly Hills and the backwoods. And because Ryan was so good, it never felt cheap or cartoonish. It felt real. Irene Ryan never had children. Both her marriages ended without a family. Her second, to Harold E. Knox, lasted 15 years. No drama, no scandals, just a quiet split in 1961, right before she hit it big. She poured her energy into work, never remarried, and left behind a legacy that couldn't be measured by red carpets or magazine covers. After the Beverly Hillbillies ended in 1971, Irene Ryan stood at a turning point. She had the chance to continue her fame with a brand new TV show built around her Granny character. It would have meant steady money, more screen time, and an easy ride into retirement, but she turned it down. At over 70 years old, she still had something left to prove, and it wasn't on television. She wanted Broadway. Not just to appear, but to conquer it. Most actors her age would have clung to the security of television. Ryan walked away from it completely, chasing a dream she'd carried for decades. It shocked everyone. The idea of an older TV star crossing into theater was nearly unheard of. But Ryan didn't care. She wasn't looking for comfort. She was looking for respect, and she got it. In 1972, Ryan was cast by Bob Fosse himself to play Baird in Pippin, one of the most anticipated Broadway productions of the year. She wasn't just background. She had her own song, No Time at All, and performed it while swinging on a trapeze. She was 70, suspended above the stage, singing her heart out and bringing the house down every night. The audience loved her. So did the critics. She wasn't just holding her own, she was stealing the show. People came to see FSY's brilliance, but they left talking about Irene Ryan. She had transformed from a sitcom matriarch into a Broadway sensation. And then came the recognition. In 1973, she was nominated for a Tony Award, Best Featured Actress in a Musical. Critics called her performance regal but lusty, a perfect mix of heart and humor. At 70, she became one of the oldest nominees in Tony history. The New York Drama Critics Circle singled her out for bringing warmth and spark to the stage. Even the New York Times said she stole every scene. In an industry that so often pushes older women aside, Ryan proved they could still lead. She wasn't just surviving, she was thriving. But just 5 months into Pippin's run, everything changed. On March 10, 1973, after finishing her big number, Ryan walked off stage and collapsed. At first, the crowd thought it was part of the show. It wasn't. She had suffered a massive stroke. The performance stopped immediately. Paramedics arrived. The news hit the press within hours. Fans were stunned. Her Broadway dream had become a nightmare. She was flown back to California. Doctors at first treated the stroke, but tests revealed something far worse. Ryan had glioblastoma, a brutal, fast-moving brain tumor. It was inoperable. Back then, survival was measured in weeks, not months. She died just 6 weeks later. On April 26, 1973, at the age of 70, she never finished her Broadway run. She never saw her Tony results. Her dream had come true, but it ended far too soon. What made it even more heartbreaking was how she lived in her final years. While her character on the Beverly Hillbillies lived in a mansion, Ryan chose a tiny home in Santa Monica, 107 Esparta Way, built in 1915. No marble floors, no red carpets, just mint green cabinets, a garden with bougainvillea, and a vintage stove. She could have bought a palace, but she didn't care. She wanted quiet. She wanted comfort. She wanted real life, not the one on camera. Even with $10 million in her name, she chose simplicity. After she died, the house began to crumble. No one moved in. The garden became overgrown. The The roof caved in. Windows shattered. Weed swallowed the path. Her fans were horrified. How could someone so rich, so beloved, be forgotten this way? But for some, it made sense. Irene Ryan had always valued peace over status. Even in death, the house reflected who she truly was. Then the discoveries began. Urban explorers sneaked inside. What they found turned her home into something else entirely, a time capsule. Props from the Beverly Hillbillies were still there. Her hat. A chipped teacup. Stacks of old scripts with her handwritten notes. Thousands of fan letters, their ink faded but their words still full of love. And in one dusty drawer, a sealed envelope, Irene Ryan's signature on the front. Inside was a letter, her final one. It wasn't just a goodbye. It was a confession. She wrote about a secret love, someone she never named. She wrote about loneliness, about the pain of being famous but feeling forgotten, about the betrayals she endured in Hollywood, about the things she'd never said publicly. It was raw, honest, and heartbreaking. A woman loved by millions, yet still haunted by what she never had. Her death certificate listed 2 causes, glioblastoma and arteriosclerotic heart disease. But what it didn't say was just how unprepared the world was to lose her. Her co-stars were devastated. Buddy Ebsen, Max Baer Jr., and Paul Henning were pallbearers. Bob Hope and Bob Fosse were honorary ones. Even Donna Douglas, her on-screen granddaughter, came to say goodbye. It wasn't just a funeral. It was a final curtain call. The entertainment world stood still. She was buried at Woodlawn Memorial Cemetery in Santa Monica. Her crypt sits next to her sister's, and on her tombstone, one word, Granny. That single name told her whole story. She may have been Irene Ryan to the world, but to her fans, she would always be Granny Clampett. And then came one last surprise. She left behind more than memories. She left behind money, over $1 million. But she didn't leave it to family. She had no children, no close relatives. Instead, she gave it to strangers, young actors chasing the same dream she once chased. She created the Irene Ryan Foundation, which still runs today. Scholarships, grants, help for students in college theater programs. 16 regional winners get $500 each. 2 national winners receive $5,000 every year. Even 50 years after her death, her gift lives on. That's the legacy of Irene Ryan, a woman who walked away from comfort, who swung on a trapeze at 70, who faced death with grace, who gave everything she had to the next generation, and whose memory still lingers in the ruins of a crumbling house, in the words of an old letter, and in the dreams of actors who never knew her but owe her everything.